So instead of fully registering an API starting from the code itself, you can also go and use the API management UI, which is useful if you have to configure more complex things like using custom policies a lot and maybe OAuth with an external policy or whatsoever. In that case, you register an API using the UI. You use one of the options to import your API definition. In my case, I'm using a Swagger Open API specification from a certain URL and then say this is the pet store API again, but this one is basically manually configured. And I'm going to import that API maybe in the organization Plexus Health. So once that API has been imported into the backend, you can create a new front-end API and which then basically creates the API proxy. And here we have to configure that API and say maybe a different exposure path, API v2 pet store, and this one, I don't know, is manually. The inbound security is a different one using the access token. And also here we add an image to that API. So now let's save that API. And now from here, if I'm happy with the configuration and I have tested everything, it's all working fine, you can export now that API using the API management CLI and say, give me all APIs. So that means for APIs, I can say get APIs from an API manager, say get. Then we have to tell which environment, which contains username, host name, and so on. In my case, I named that environment demo. And now it returns me a list of all APIs registered in that environment. So we see there is now the pet store manually configured, and I can now say, or let's say give me that manually configured API only. Okay, and that's fine. And now we say the output format should be no longer the console, it should be a JSON file, and that should go into a folder, maybe at the current location. Let's call it export so that we can see it over here. And now it exports that API in the current folder. And of course, now you can move that around. So that means as we have imported the manually configured API definition, it has automatically downloaded the necessary certificates. It has, of course, the image is also exported. And this is the API configuration based on what we have configured on the UI with all the references to certificates. Then the client organization, in our case, it is owned by Plexus Health, and that's why that's the client organization. And now you can go and create a folder for that pet store API or for the API you want, and then take over that configuration in the same structure as before and register or configure the workflow as before. It is just some kind of a shortcut to avoid that you have to maintain that configuration file completely on your own. So that's basically what this video should show.